Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Development Insights podcast, where we bring you ideas, experiences, and best practices from the real estate development industry. My name is Payam Nursalahi. I'm your host here. My guest for this episode is Dave Dekort. Dave is a director of project management at Mattamy Homes, and he's considered to be one of their senior leaders. For those of you who are not familiar with Mattamy Homes is one of the biggest privately owned home builders in North America and for sure in Canada. And Dave has been with the company for over 2 decades now, started there as a project manager and worked his way up all the way through the ladder, to the director position, where he oversees most of the Midrise projects and the urban infill projects that Mattamy Homes does these days. Mattamy was formerly mostly focused on the low-rise section of the market, but they have recently changed their focus, and we talk about this in this episode. I met Dave a few months ago at an industry event, and we instantly started talking about different construction methods, different construction systems and typologies of the buildings when it comes to building mid-rises. And it's turned out that we have a shared interest on the topic of building mid-rise buildings. And that's why I asked him to join us on the podcast. One of the things that Dave brings to this episode is his vast experience with this type of building. Mattamy being one of the biggest builders in the country, they have had multiple experiences, multiple opportunities to try different systems, learn from each system, and see the pros and cons of each of these systems, which we dive into this episode. We talk about why Mattamy is putting more focus on urban developments, what are the challenges of mid-rise construction, and how you could benefit from different typologies and systems of construction to overcome some of these challenges. And we talk quite at length and in detail about each and every system that we've worked with, being it mass timber, CFS, or cold form steel, or precast, or the simple wood framing or stick build, and concrete. And I'm particularly very excited. We had a lot of fun during this episode, and I'm hoping you find it helpful as well. As always, you can find more information about our podcast and our guests on the website, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. That's all one phrase, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. And I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. Please remember to subscribe to the show. It really helps us grow the show. And please tell others about it. If you find this information and this show useful to you, make sure to send them an email or forward them a link and help us grow the show. Thank you very much. Hi, Dave. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Fantastic. Thank you for being here. We've had some technical difficulties making this happen, but it's great that we did, and I appreciate your sticking with it. Why don't we start with introducing you to our audience? Maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself, company that you work for. And
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Dave Dekort. Thank you for having me on and entertaining hopefully some people for the next little while. But I work for Mattamy Homes. I'm currently in the position of a director of project management in our Mattamy Urban Division in the Greater Toronto Area. What that means is I get the distinct pleasure of managing project teams and overseeing construction sites of various mid-rise, 8-story or 6-story to 12-story buildings in and around the GTA.
Perfect. And for those of our listeners who are not from Toronto or Canada, maybe give us a little bit background about Mattamy so people have a little bit context.
Yeah. I've been with the company for 12 years, so I have seen the company grow, which is fantastic. So Mattamy Homes is a Canadian home builder that started in the outside of the Toronto area and in a town, Burlington and Oakville. Started as a low-rise residential builder, did that for a good number of years, still continue to be a low-rise residential builder, that's for sure. The company has expanded considerably over the years, entered into different markets, the US and also within Canada. We've expanded outside of Toronto in Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, and a lot of the southern states in the US. So a lot of the Sunbelt areas, they call them, I guess. That's where we're predominantly working. So it's been great to see this company grow and be a part of the growth with it.
Perfect. And I think it's fair to say that Mattamy is one of the largest home builders in the country. I don't know if there's an official ranking for it.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Yeah. And we did also recently change our business as well. And I've been doing a lot of focus within what we call urban business. So that's why there's urban division. So branching further away from low rise into more of a high rise setting.
So urban means mid rise, or it means mid rise and high rise?
Yeah, our business is in two folds. One being, call it pretty much Part 9, which Ontario Building Code Part 9 being anything up to about 3.5 stories. And then typically 4 stories or larger become buildings, which fall under the Part 3 of the building code. That's generally how it's sort of separated.
Mm-hmm. And the urban division of Mattamy, which you're involved in, focuses on, I guess, Part 3 of the code. Is that the intention?
Yeah, 100%.
Let me start there. Why the shift? For the longest time, you guys have been doing low-rise and subdivisions and great projects. And I have a guess, but I would like to hear from you. Why the shift? Why are you guys changing the business or changing the focus?
I think it's just being able to provide products that people can afford to live in. So my evolution with Mattamy, when I first started, we predominantly did single detached homes, and we started to build semis, and then we started to build townhomes, and we started to bring in back-to-back townhomes, and then stacked townhomes, and then, hey, what? Buildings have smaller suites, or not smaller suites, but more trying to keep an affordable product really within a market where costs are increasing, land values are increasing, and affordability is getting harder. So that just pushes companies to look towards different products that they need to learn and build and focus in on in order to maintain growth, right? So that's really, I think, the company has grown because the market conditions have forced all of the developers to look towards different products to build in order to keep affordable products, right?
So in other words, maybe we're the golden days of subdivisions and single family dwellings and detached houses. I want to say they're still going to be built, but probably not as many as it used to be and not at scale. Is that a fair statement?
No, I'd say so. Yeah, you could probably look into a lot of the government initiatives to intensify urban areas, right? So as opposed to the sprawl, which involves cars, commuting, all that fun stuff, try to intensify the areas that you have, right? With more and utilize the systems that are already in place, being schools and transit and all that. So there's a shift there, and there's a propensity for municipalities to intensify. And so, hey, better figure it out.
You're following the trend. You're following the market, and that's always a good thing. With that said, because I know when you and I were talking a few weeks ago, we have a shared interest on the mid-rise buildings and shared history and as well as similar experiences. And it's one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you about on this podcast was to get your take from a large developer/builder company with tons of resources and repetitive project models. And I'm going to assume lots of efficiencies built into the process being development, being sales, being construction, and probably post-construction. I want to dive deep into those processes and some of the initiatives. I appreciate that you're not going to give away the secret sauce, if you may, but as much as you can share. So, and the reason for that line of questioning is that I think, as you mentioned, we're going to need a lot of mid-rise buildings, probably in the hundreds over the years, in the Toronto and GTA area, and for that matter, probably most of Canada. And I don't think you're going to be building it all by yourself. You're going to need a lot of help from other developers and builders. So it would be great if you can share the experience. So let me start by prefacing in that way. I'm going to say, let's go through it step by step. If I'm going through a development phase of a new mid-rise project, 8-story project, right, in an urban setting, and something that maybe you take a pick, maybe something that you already worked on, what are some of the key takeaways or lessons that you guys have learned through repetition on different building types or approval processes dealing with municipalities that our audience should know about?
So I think it's important to take all of the aspects required in order to make effective decisions to allow you to build something that is, first of all, zoned and approved for the area to which you have your piece of land. That's step one. When accepted by the municipalities to some degree, that they're sort of on board, but also something that will fit into the market and can be sold, because obviously if you don't sell it, you're not going to build it. Mm-hmm. So having input from people that know all the different aspects that goes into developing a condo throughout the process. So maybe the time you buy the piece of land to when you actually move people in and start a warranty and process. Having everybody sort of around the table from the beginning to provide their inputs is, I think, very important, right? And sometimes it's maybe you don't talk to the construction guy until you've already gone to sale. The construction guy says, "Hey, wait a minute, where's the air shafts? Or where are you going to put the electrical closets?" And they're like, "Oh, what do you mean?" Right. Well, that's or a consultant or a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer type say. So there's one. I think it's Steve Covey wrote the book, and the one thing I always remember is begin with the end in mind, right? So if you know what the end's going to be,
that's habit number 4.
Yeah.
Yes, that's habit number 4 of Stephen Covey's 7
so
habits.
I love that.
Correct,
that
you're right.
With the end in mind. So if you know what the end's going to be, you better begin with everyone around the table to make sure you get there. So
right, no, that's if on a bigger scale of things. So basically, once you start defining a project, make sure you have your key people there. And I want to elaborate, and please correct me if I'm wrong, meaning have your marketing people, have your sales team there, who the person who's going to eventually be responsible for selling it, have him there. And I want to open a bracket and ask you a question. Having someone involved at that stage, does it necessarily mean you have them full-time engaged in that project? Or are you just having, let's say, what's the right word for it? Brain dump sessions and just say, okay, like, here's the project, give us some input, focus on it for 2-3 meetings, and then we'll recap in 3-4 months or 6 months down the road once the approval. How does that process work?
I think it's just like some of the key decisions, like making sure that everyone has their input, right? So like it's the suite layout. Okay, suite layouts are marketable. There's a lot of things that need to go into it, but there's also constructability and mechanical designs that need to factor into those suite layouts. So making sure that everyone has input on that. A floor plate, there's issues if it's too big, there's issues if it's too small, there's issues like that type of thing. So getting the right plate involves more than just sort of a sales and marketing focus on it, like marketability, right? You can get into, hey, what are we going to use on the outside of the building? Cladding materials, interfacing with windows and such. So like it's just going back to making sure that, and even structural engineer, we could get some input on mechanical, that type of thing. You don't necessarily have to bring them on board full time, but maybe you got to spend a little bit just to make sure you're doing the right thing at an earlier stage before you go to, okay, well, let's go make some permit plans now. Let's go make some issue for tender drawings or construction drawings. Like while you're working on a site plan application, which involves an architectural design, landscape design, all sorts of things like that. Maybe it's a good idea to just sort of run it by a structural engineer, mechanical engineer as well, just to make sure that you got everything in there. So
you have an overall picture of the process and the path you're going. Like going back to the Stephen Covey book, I think he mentions that if you're going through a rainforest and you're cutting like the bushes and making your way through, once in a while, someone needs to go up a tree and see which direction you're going. So you want to make sure you climb the tree at the beginning and know where you're going before you start cutting down the bushes. Yes. So expanding on that, I agree with everything you said, but I also, and I'm asking for myself because I sometimes struggle with this. There's also a fine line between involving everyone and asking for opinion and at some point having to make a decision. Like you get a lot of parties involved, a lot of input, a lot of smart people, and they will look at it. You can keep looking at a project for a very long time before you make movement. And I've come across situations that we kind of go into an analysis paralysis situation. Yep. And sometimes there needs to be a framework and like a final thing. It's like, this is it, we're moving forward. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's almost like sometimes the right decision is actually just making the decision. Because without making the decision, things don't move forward, right? We always say hindsight is always 20/20, and decisions that we've made sometimes are about a year later, maybe that wasn't the right decision. But if you didn't make that call at the time, things may have not have proceeded anyways, right? So that is important. And I think it's almost like a politician. You're going to hear from all your constituents, but you're not going to please everybody. At least pretend you're listening to them.
Hopefully more than pretending, but
hopefully they are really listening. But I don't want to get into politics right now because
I was just going to say these days politics is a very hot topic these days. So we bring everyone into the same table. We sit down. We go through the overall ideas of the project. And now basically the project is in probably your hand or someone on your team that is now, okay, this is a project, here's the project definition. And we're at the stage that we start to go through the approval process. We start to bring on dozens and dozens of the consultants and stakeholders, I want to say, that are getting involved from the municipalities, from, again, the consultants, from the trades, from, like, you guys do construction yourself, but if you're a developer that doesn't have construction arm, you would probably bring in an SCM either earlier or at that stage. Do you have any pointers, tips, guidelines for how to navigate? Because I'm going to preface it by saying that from my experience in that stage, you could be dealing with 40, 50 different stakeholders or people at least, and it could get very cumbersome.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, okay, you're at the stage. Now you're, okay, I get marching orders. Let's start to bring this to life. Let's start to dig deeper into it. You guys got to remember that it's probably going to change. So if you waited until everything was perfect, you probably never get to design a building to its entirety, right? So that's always something to remember. And I always say sometimes you just need to fix the train while it's going down the tracks a little bit, but you should have it running down the track because it's more important to keep things moving, right? So I think it's remembering that is important, and I'm sure your consultants remember that as well. Because when things do change, it shouldn't be like a catastrophic moment. It should be sort of like, okay, yeah, maybe you can give some heads up on potential changes that might happen to something. But it's not a moment where everyone throws up their hands. Oh my God, we got to start from the beginning. No, it's refining it. So, but just making sure you have a good team as well, right? People that you've worked with probably before, and if you have worked with them,
how do you select a good team?
It's good to see some work that they've done for sure. If you're going to go with, say, it's a new engineer that you never dealt with, talking to some others that have worked with them before about referrals helps. It is when you do find someone who has done a good job with you, an architect, engineer, whoever it may be. It's good to continue with them as well, right? And develop even further, because they've learned what Mattamy likes to put in buildings. They know what our standards is. They know what we do, we don't like. So that is beneficial as well, right? Building on past successes, learning from past failures. They always say the mistakes cost money, but also going for training courses costs money. As long as you learn from your mistakes, at least you've learned a little bit from it, right?
That's good. That's a good one.
I don't know if they always say it. I like to say it sometimes because we'll take
it. Well, no, for sure. So okay, let me recap. So basically, on the front end is that appreciate that change is part of the process, not an exception in the process, and I totally agree with that. And it would be great if, when we're setting up consultant scopes and awarding contracts and stuff, that we always allow for that, so we're not kind of surprised. And I see that happening, unfortunately, when the approvals get prolonged and get lengthier, the changes are even more costly. But like you said, it's a part of the game. And on the second part is that choose the right team, or a good team for yourself, for your company, which, again, I want to elaborate on by saying that development and construction is a lengthy process. Many of these projects you and I are involved in were probably 5, 6, 7 years in length, from the idea to after the post-construction phase. And it's very important, at least in my experience, to, when you work with people, that you're working with people that not only know what they're doing, but actually can work together well. Like, if someone doesn't respond to your email or don't pick up a call or is always late on something, as much as they might know what they're doing, it would at some point hurt you. And that's my 2 cents on that. I don't know if
I can completely agree. Yeah. Like we've seen in the industry, there's peaks and valleys. There's busy times and there's slow times. We're in a bit of a slow time right now. So that's availability to trades, to consultants it's pretty good right now. When the busy times,
that's true.
It's difficult sometimes to move the needle along because of consultants being busy, and they have their workflows that they need to do as well. And not when it's funny, when the market's busy, you want to get things moving as fast as possible. But that's sort of typically when everyone's busy, so things actually get a bit slower, a little bit harder. And it's when you don't want to move, when you have an opportunity where maybe we just need to slow things down a little bit and let the market sort of catch up to where it was. Everyone seems to have no problem getting things done fast. If you are dealing with a consultant who's been great maybe in the past but now is not getting your answers quick enough, or taking longer to prepare drawings for you and such, maybe they're not looking after your company's interest.
And I think naturally that kind of happens throughout the industry, that like next time when there is a down point and when you have an option, then it might affect your next choice. Like, because at the end of the day, we who do this for a living and you do this for long term, these ups and downs hopefully come and go like they have in the past, and they probably will in the future. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about the overall picture. We talked about the overall stepping first steps of the process in a development project. And I want to now dive through the details. You and I, when we were having lunch about a month or so ago, have a shared interest and shared language about actual construction, when it seemed that we share some passion over there. So I've been trying for myself to learn and establish some, call it best practices and best product fits or methods for the mid-rise buildings that we were talking about, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories, or maybe 9-story type of building. So I have some opinions on that, but I'm very curious to know your take on it. And I'm going to go in phases, ask you a question in phases, because the way I look at it is that when you're building a 40-story building, you're bound to use gas in place concrete. You're bound. Like, there's not much deviation from that. You could do very creative things, but you won't be able to meet the market demands at a certain price point if you want to get really creative with the things that some people are doing across the world. So concrete, high rise, I'll just put that aside because you could use that on a mid-rise building. But I want to go to the other end of the spectrum. Many of the people who are for the first time doing a mid-rise building are coming from a low-rise background and are coming from a house building background. I had a call a few weeks ago with a potential client that he's saying, okay, we've built houses. Now we want to go do a 6-story building and we want to do the framing ourselves with the same framing mentality. Walk us through that. I think you have had an experience with wood framing. And when I say wood, I don't mean mass timber. I mean stick framing. Walk us through that. What are your thoughts? What are your lessons learned?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. And to add to what you were saying, like, it's, if you're going to build a house, you're going to build it out of wood. No questions asked, right? 3-story building, wood.
Right.
You're going to build a high rise, you're going to do a custom place, 12 stories up, whatever you want to call it. If you're going to build something between the 4 and the 12, there's just so many different options. And I know that, and this was one of our conversations at lunch, and it's like, how do you decide on what the best one to do is? Now, the wood framing, yes, we've done quite a few. Started off with building 4-story wood buildings. Obviously, with Mattamy, we built a ton of homes in the GTA, lots of carpenters, lots of deals to be had. So looking towards wood it's almost like a natural progression, right? Which we did, and obviously still continue to look at. It's something you would never take your eyes off. Wood buildings, I did some 4s, like I was saying, and then we actually did a couple of 6-story wood frame buildings as well. The product, you go up relatively quickly. The framing's conventional framing, whatever, 2x6. You can go panelization, you can go stick build. On a building that size, it's probably best to look for more panelization, just the amount of the work that would have to be done on site. So yeah, we would traditionally look for prefabricated walls and floors, right, to be put together off-site in a factory and then brought to site and assembled together. You can also control the quality, right? You're nailing patterns, you're gluing of the floors on the, typically we're using, they call them the wood joist, the name that's been at the time, but the guy joist, not I joist wood there, and doing all that in the factory, which is great, gives good quality. One of the things with buildings is once you get, as you're going up with a building, you also want to try to start doing some of the rough-ins and dropping some pipes, running risers, putting in some drains, toilet drains, shower drains, even putting some of the HVAC systems up. In a building, you want to be able to do that as you're going up. And with a wood frame building, there's one thing that we always have to adhere to, and that's fire separation. So every residential unit has to be, typically it's about a 1-hour fire separation from the others, right? Or from a corridor. To do that in a wood building, that involves insulation, drywall, resilient channel, all sorts of different products make up that assembly. And when you're doing that, it can't get wet. So you definitely, there's not a lot of rough-ins you can do in a wood frame building as you're building it. So you're sort of a little bit slow to that, I guess, to that part of the construction, which makes it a bit harder. The other thing is in our industry, buildings, Part 3 buildings, typically done out of concrete. Concrete is an 8-inch concrete slab will give you a 1 or 2 hour fire rating. And if you only need 1 hour, that's great. But you can immediately hang your pipes underneath it, because there's nothing you need to do to create that fire separation. So the trades are used to that. When they show up to a building and they got their tools, they look up and they want to see concrete. They see wood, and they usually just pack up their tools and head back to their truck. You don't even understand what am I doing here? It's so foreign, right? And that was a big challenge for us as we built wood buildings. And then you're not putting this. You're not doing any work until you have that drywall. You can do some prep, you can do some areas, you can do what you need to do. But by the time you prep the place, the whole thing is almost drywall. And you better be watertight. You start to add moisture in a wood building is definitely something you want to eradicate and get out of there, because we all know what wood and water can create.
Don't really
and so
mix,
you know, you don't want to have that mess. Add in some, if your drywall gets wet and your insulation gets wet, now you probably created a catastrophe, is what I like to call it. So that's a big challenge. Like the wood part of the building, fantastic. The sustainability piece on a wood building, this is a product that actually, as it's being made, which is basically a tree growing in a forest. And if they're sustainable forests, for every time you cut down a tree, another one has already grown in its place. You're not deforesting to create these products. It actually takes carbon out of the atmosphere as it's growing, right? So it's really one of the only building products that actually, what they call a carbon sink, right? Versus a concrete or steel, which utilizes a lot of carbon through materials that have to be mined and the fossil fuels that need to run gas-fired equipment or big melters and all sorts of things to create those products, right? So the sustainability side on wood is something that is, as we look towards becoming more sustainable within our world and country, it's definitely a good news story there. But yeah, when you get up to that roof,
it's challenging.
Boy, it gets tough, and you better be prepared to have a lot of fun battles with your trades to get this work done effectively, right?
Yeah, and I want to do a quick recap for people who are listening, because I think this is a important point for those who are coming from a low-rise background to appreciate what you're saying. And I could not agree more with everything you just said. Is that when you go from a house, the single-family dwelling, which I prefer to refer that way, because basically in a single-family dwelling, you do not need to have all the separations, being it fire rating or acoustic, because acoustic is another big part, especially if you're building a product that you 100%. Want to sell and you have certain requirements that you need to meet. We all know that acoustic complaints are one of the highest, if not the highest complaints when it comes to a condo setting and Terrion requirements. So getting that separation right is beyond critical. And to your point, our means of getting there is having it to cover or protect wood drywall and having the separations done properly. And I want to make sure our audience appreciates that if you're going there and if you are coming from a background, or if you are bringing people who are coming from a background of single-family low-rise buildings, you have to be extremely careful, to quote what Dave just said, to not end up in a mess, because it's very easy to end up in a mess if you don't appreciate how the sequencing works, how the fire rating, fire separations work, and the impact of a snowstorm or impact of a heavy rainfall, which could have in warping your wood, having to replace a whole bunch of things. And I want to also open a bracket here, and for those who are listening, please listen to the episode that we had with Raymond Van Gro. He also explains why when you go from a 3-story building to a 5-story building, the complexities of the structure changes in terms of how the wood needs to work. And okay, so you're and I pretty much on the same thing. I agree that the panelized would definitely help. I would not build a 5-story building stick built like that. I would not.
I get a headache thinking
anyone. Makes me want to change careers. But yes, but the panelized maybe. And if you do panelize, you need to make sure that those panels, and I heard you mention as well, that needs to be climatized in proper places, storage. You don't want your panels to sit in someone's yard for 6 months, then show up to site having all sorts of defects on it, right? So that's wood. And I think I'm going to close it by be careful about shrinkage, because that's another thing. When you go high with wood, shrinkage is an option that might happen.
100%, yeah.
So
100%.
We talked about concrete, we talked about wood. What's your next pick for a 5, 6, 8-story building?
So another build form that we've done is we basically CFS walls, which are called form steel walls, and typically hollow core precast floors. So that combination of those two materials going together to create a building 6, 7, 8 stories seems to be a build form that we've done quite often now. There's some similar characteristics to wood, because some of these walls that make up your exterior, or all the exterior walls that make up, they're instead of wood walls, they're basically cold form steel walls, and so they come with cladding on them. Not cladding, sorry. They come with dense glass on them. They actually can come with cladding on them. There are some opportunities for you to have them.
You have to pay the premium, but they do
with some cladding forms. I mean, EFIS could be one of them, and then brought to site already pre-finished, which was advantageous, like for everyone who who lives in our great country, we get terrible winters and we get a lot of rain, and doing some of that on-site cladding on a large footprint mid-rise building, because typically mid-rise buildings do have those bigger footprints. They do have a lot of exterior walls to do. You're doing it in the winter months, that becomes a lot harder and a lot costlier too, right? So you're into scaffolding with tarps and heat to give you the right temperature to put up those finishes. So it takes time, and if it's a really windy day, guess what? You're not working. If it's raining that day, guess what? You're not working. In a factory, it's 21 degrees and it's sunny every day, right? So you got to...
Just to be clear, you're talking about the EIFS portion of it, not the CFS
I'm talking about
portion.
more the EIFS portion on say, a CFS wall. So just one of the advantages with that type of product, right? To maybe do some pre-finished sides.
Yeah.
But getting back to the build form, the one great thing about it is now we have concrete as our fire separation, and also for sound attenuation as well, right? So it's a great product. Drill a hole through it, put some fire caulking, donuts, whatever you need to do to fire stop that hole around that pipe penetration, and you're done. So we're back to a building where a mechanical, electrical trade is not going to go running out the door because they see wood. So they understand it. So there's a bit more of acceptance now as you move further within the building, right? Of that build form. Some of the great advantage with a precast floor is it's already cured, right? So by the time it comes to site, it's ready to go. You drop it in, you do some welding underneath, you make sure that your structural engineer comes by and says, hey, everything's great. And then you can start putting walls on top of that floor, right? So there's no reshoring, there's no curing that you need to wait on say, if you're doing a cast in place floor, that could prevent you from starting below, right? So that's definitely a help. These do go pretty fast with the installations, right? You can do it pretty big. I think we were talking about how quickly you can get across a floor with hollow core precast.
You could have floors done in like 1 or 2 days, where if you were to do it in the wood or in even cast in place concrete, it would take you a week or so, if not more, right? So you're saving a lot on the floor assembly. And to your point, I think in that mix of CFS and hollow core that you just mentioned, you're almost getting the best of both worlds, because the concrete as a floor, it has so many advantages that it's really hard to replicate with anything else. I guess the only downside I can think of a hollow core floor is the weight that you need to lift, and some of the limitations on the length of the spans, which we can talk about that. But other than that, you're basically borrowing every good thing that you could from concrete, and at the same time, use a lighter structure on your verticals, on your load-bearing walls or exterior walls, and to your point, not have to wait for the fire rating to happen before you start working in the building, which is a big deal. If you have 20 units per floor and you need to go, the minute you drop the precast, maybe you want to wait a little bit to get things sorted out, but there's nothing really stopping you from starting your rough ends, right? Yeah,
it's very true, very true. And not having to even make sure that the moisture content in a building. I remember we were doing that 6-story wood frame building. We actually did moisture readings before we would insulate and drywall the walls in, because once you do that, you could be locking moisture within a wall cavity. That's not good. So we actually did moisture readings on the floors before, and in some cases wait a second, we can't close this up yet. So gotta watch out for things like that. Versus when you get that concrete and steel building, it's not retaining moisture. You can do some prep work with, of course, drywall and insulation. You don't want to get wet, but you could probably use a mineral wool, like rock wool product that can get wet actually, and not really. There's no long-term effects with it getting wet. And maybe use dense glass versus drywall, which can be. So things like that, you can speed things up a bit if you have to do some prep work behind some of the wet walls or whatnot, or up in the bulkheads. But it's nice. The product goes up quick. The other great thing is there's very minimal shrinkage. So if you're going 4-story woods,
if any,
the shrinkage was very manageable. 6-story was a whole new world. So yes. Be careful. That's all I have to say.
I think to your point, and going back to like these mixes, and this is the fun for me, at least personally, it's a weird fun, but it's the fun part of working on these mid-rise buildings, because you can mix and match and try. So from my perspective, the concrete elements of the floor that the precast floor will bring is a good thing to have. The non-shrinkage and strength that the CFS wall brings is a great thing to have, and the speed that it goes up. And you could also use it as load-bearing, non-load-bearing. And in my mind, you have 80% of your walls done by the time your structure is up.
Yeah.
So your minimal framing, you're framing a washroom here and there, or a bathtub or something, a bathroom or something. So that's a great piece. And just in brackets, I want to go back to the sustainability aspect of it that you were just mentioning. It's not like wood is 100% green and then all of a sudden you go to CFS and it becomes entirely non-green. It's actually CFS, to my surprise, and I learned this a few months ago, is very clean compared to concrete. It's not as clean as wood, but it's significantly cleaner than concrete when it goes to on the scale of sustainability. So that it helps on that situation as well.
It is. And it's much more controlled production as well. So being all the CFS panels are built offsite and shipped in. We're not doing any of that on site. And so you can control better, right? Less waste, more control, bring in the right size lengths, cuts. A lot of them even build their own, create their own studs in their plants, right? So there's a lot more control to it, right? And
I think there's one point that is important for our audience to also keep in mind is that the more you go toward the prefabrication side, the better your consultants need to be as coordination. And I know you're smiling, you know where I'm going. Because once something is approved on the shop drawing and stamped and is in production, there's a very good chance that you're not going to catch that mistake if you made one until it shows up and all of a sudden something doesn't fit. And at that point, it's a big problem. So if you're trying to benefit from all the components of a prefabricated system, please make sure your consultant team, one, has some experience with it, two, pay them enough to be able to work on it. Don't cut their contracts so short that they don't have the time to work on it. So wood, CFS, CIP, we talked about, or cast in place concrete. Is there anything else that you think it might be the next frontier of building an efficient mid-rise building?
Yeah, so there's another build form that we've explored and done a few buildings right now, and that's what it's basically a total precast building. So total precast being not only are the floors a mixture of hollow core and solid precast floors. The solids are where you have balconies and you have to cantilever, you have to use the solid. The walls are now done out of precast concrete. So your staircase shafts, your elevator shafts, any of the bearing walls, the shear walls would all be done out of concrete, but also your exterior walls are all done out of concrete as well. So it creates a whole build form that is done offsite, which is, I think, a great thing to do. And more our industry explores it and more opportunities we have, I think it's just better for us. And get back to the controlled environments. It's concrete. It's a very solid product, not very heavy. So you got to take that into consideration. But they've come up with some innovative, some of the companies doing it, making it the cladding choices. So if you want to make it look like brick, they can make it look like brick. You want to make it look like wood, they can actually do that as well. You want it to look like stucco or even metal paneling, they can actually make it look that way as well. So it's important that the buildings also look good, and we don't want to be putting up buildings that people drive by and they're not looking at that one. So that they do have there's opportunities there to utilize the benefits of the concrete, the speed of offsite construction and on-site installation, which speeds things up, and also, hey, our favorite fire separation, right? What's it? Concrete.
Yeah, that's concrete.
And sound, right?
You have it over there.
It's a great product, right, for that. So, and even on the sustainability side, you cast in place where the trucks are driving all the way across town to deliver that concrete, and there's some wastage with every one of those trucks that drive out. Well, if you're in a factory and say maybe you're batching your own concrete right there, pouring it in, you're now even on that as well,
eliminating a whole bunch of trips. Yes. Yeah. And on top of that, I have to say that there are ways to make concrete cleaner and perhaps add a certain percentage of ash or slag into your mixes, which is hard to do on the construction side because it just affects your curation times. But if you're doing it in a precast factory, perhaps, and I don't know if they do, but perhaps you could do it and not really affect that much during the process. So yeah, that's interesting. I have seen a few of those all precast, which seems to be happening more and more these days. I haven't had the opportunity of working on one yet, but it seems interesting. I want to also make sure we talk about the metal decks with a composite floor, because I think that's another, I want to say it's an in-between scenario, if you may, right? Like there are positions that we've worked on projects, and I don't want to name particular products, but the metal deck with a concrete topping, and these can be very deep or very like relatively. Yeah. That also, in my mind, brings a mix of best of both worlds situation, because you get like with 3.5 inches of concrete, I think you get the proper rating that you need. But at the same time, because you're using like some sort of a metal deck, you are probably using less concrete. You might have a little bit more curing time and shoring and jacks and stuff like that you have to deal with. But I don't know. What's your take on that? What has your experience?
We had a very successful project in Brampton using that system for the floor. And walls were CFS. The floors were done out of decking with a concrete. I think it was 3 inches thick. And then what they have is it's probably every 2 feet. What you call is like a little beam, a little flute that comes down. I think overall you're probably about 8 inches, and in those spaces between those beams, one great thing about that product is that you achieve your fire separation with only the 3 inches of concrete, and you can actually hang your mechanical equipment within that space as well. So it's I think it's a bit more than 8, actually. I think maybe it's 11 inches.
I think I was just thinking, I think the overall assembly could be somewhere between 10 even 14. Depends on the bay lengths that you might go with.
I'm digging back a couple of years. But I think it was about 11 inches. So I think it was 3 inches, and you got about 8 inches for the beams that put down, right? So really nice. A beauty thing about pouring the 3-inch topping on it, it's you can actually pour a nice level floor. So there's a lot less work having to do. And actually that's also with the Hulker as well. That topping really helps. Patching and grinding that we have to do in a lot of our buildings that are cast in place to allow for us to put all the laminates and the vinyl tiles and stuff that need to go down these days that require great tolerance for being flat. With those type of products, you're pretty much there. You might need a little bit of effort in there. There's still the dirty deflection work that always comes into play with concrete, but you still might need a little bit of that, but it's not as drastic or amount of work that's required when you do a cast in place. So that's a great benefit for it.
No, that's also a good point. And you can because you're pouring less concrete, if you do it right, you have the option of getting a very decent finish and potentially eliminate the need for flooding the floor with a self-level compound or something, which helps the cost. So that's definitely another option. So is there anything that I haven't asked you on the system side, because I want to switch gear and go to another part of the conversation?
I think you've touched on all the systems that I've actually built with Mattamy, which is great. All the different types. There's always pros and cons to everything, and really understand them. I love the point earlier on about having the consultants that have done those types of products before. You definitely want to get on a horse that's done it before versus one that's in his first time around the race. So it's lessons learned are important, and if you have to
everyone's going to have a first time. I want it to be fair. I want to say everyone needs to start somewhere, but at the same time, you want to gradually step. I think it's probably my point of view on that, is that going from designing a house to designing a 6-story building is probably not the best move. Maybe go 2 floors at a time and see the differences. But yes, you're right. Like that's especially prefabricated. I think not necessarily everyone appreciates how much coordination goes into. I've been involved, and I am involved in some projects that the coordination pre-construction goes for 2 years, because we need to get every single thing down to a few millimeters, and that's your margin, right? So you need to.
And it might not be you may have a consultant that may have not have done that type of build form before. Well, maybe it's you could maybe try a new one, try them out, maybe bring the trade on board, like maybe lock up that deal with whoever's going to be providing you the panels or the floors or whatever it may be. Maybe lock that up a little bit earlier and have them at the table.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Right? These systems, the less known systems or the newer systems, new is probably not the best word for it. The less known systems, there's a learning curve for everyone involved, even for me and you, and like the trades on site, like you mentioned. So it's very important to. I think these days we're allowing for a lot of design assist per se, for a proprietary system. It has its own pros and cons, like everything else. Like you're bounding yourself to a particular system typically earlier than you would have done otherwise in the process of building a building. But it comes with the benefit of now you actually have the expert eyes looking at the system and then looking at the project as a whole and see, okay, like what I need that connection to be like that. Don't go this much. Shift the base a little bit closer so you don't go from an 8-inch hollow core to an 10-inch hollow core, if you may, right? So those are all the fun stuff. I want to start wrapping up this conversation. You and I can talk for hours about these topics, but I don't know if everyone wants to listen. We've established that you and I have some reading habits in common. What do you read regularly to keep yourself updated with industry trends?
Okay, so I'm a news junkie. I will read news articles left, right, and center. So that's step one. Now, news these days is just your sources are, anyways, it's all weird these days. It used to be so easy. You just get a couple of newspapers, read the Star, read the Post, and you're all good. But nowadays, there's so many different places to get it. So it becomes interesting actually keeping up with what we consider traditional news and what is out there now with people that are
it's a challenge
doing podcasts. It's like the world has changed, right? So hey, broaden your horizons and look at a lot of different sources. So that's step one. And I am not a fictitious book reader. I like to read real things, right? So lots of different things that I enjoy reading, but a lot of it has to do with just I'll watch a movie, I'll enjoy that, but I'm not into.
Do you have any book suggestions for us?
Nothing's coming to top of mind just at this moment, but I'm also a person that could just fall into snake holes on an iPad, sitting there just reading and exploring, and that or a rabbit hole. Snake hole is pretty small. Rabbit hole will be bigger, but yeah, doing that kind of fun stuff too. But
the Stephen Covey book that you mentioned is probably on my top 5 list of all books of all time. So that I would suggest that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If anyone's listening, that's a must read, and probably I've read that about 20 times.
It's a great book. Over the years. Actually, I read it again just recently. Just sort of whipped through it. Yeah, I probably skipped a bunch of stuff, but
now you want me? You make me want to go back and do that again.
So I'm gonna have to read that sucker again. But they're great, right? There's a lot of great little inspirational books too, which I do enjoy reading them. To sort of gain some ways to have a better life for yourself and be a better person in this world.
Good.
So
that's good. Speaking of having a better life for yourself, let's talk to the new generation. You've been doing this for a while. I think you've been with the company for more than 2 decades, maybe 3 decades right now.
This year will be my 25th year at Mattamy. So the math is easy because I started in 2000. So it's 2025, 25 years.
Talk to Dave at Y2K. Talk to Dave at 2000. What pointers, guidelines, or some tricks would you have told him, or paths you would have told him to follow?
First of all, you got to do something you love, right? And even growing up myself, going through school and whatnot, I was always interested in construction and housing in particular, to be honest with you, influenced by others to get me to that. But I loved it. And now I never felt I'm not going to be building houses. I also, the mindset that I had back then, I don't think is right. I think the schooling back then was like, no, you got to go to university. You got to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, or a financial guy. Like, you're not going to be a carpenter or that type of thing. Like, and you sort of a little bit, and the opportunities weren't there as much as they are now. So there's a lot more, which I love, the college programs interlining with universities to give you sort of more of a real education per se that has a bit more real life learnings as well. I love that. Co-op is way more than it used to be. Anyone who's young, thinking about going to college, university, do a co-op. It will it'll take maybe an extra year to get through school. Well worth it. You're going to learn how to find a job. You're going to learn how to work. You're going to learn you're going to get a bit of money in your pocket as you go through school. So do co-op. It's fantastic. I'm a huge supporter of co-op. We at Mattamy, we bring in, there's quite a few that continue on their careers with us through high school co-op programs and universities, right? So that's a great one, but do something you really love, because you want to wake up in the morning and feel happy that you're going to work. And if you're not, think of something else, because 25 years is a long time, but if you're doing something you love, it's not a grind. It's enjoyable, right?
And you only get one life. You don't want to throw it away like that. And I want to ask you one last question. If you're talking to a new developer who doesn't have the resources that Mattamy has, or the personnel or the history? What are the one or two top mistakes they should avoid?
Well, that's a good one. Yeah, because we do have a lot of people that get to do a lot of different jobs at Mattamy, which is helpful. And if you're in a small builder, you're going to have to wear all those hats. I just think listen to as many people as you can. Try to get free advice. So go to seminars, they have industry events like Construct Canada show. You can sign up for a whack. If you're moderately interested in some of the stuff, go sit in. Two things, you might learn a little bit, but you also might meet some other people that are sharing the same interests as you and strike up some conversations and meet them at a coffee shop. Just network. Like we use that word all the time. Yeah, it's good. It's good to do that because you can one day sit at a podcast and have a great conversation with someone who you met at an event a month ago, right? Who shares the same interests with you, and it's easy. So I think
it's true. Try
to be out there and talk to as many people, what you can get free advice, right? And try to go see things like I go to a sales office if you're going to build some condos, go check out the competition. Like act like you're going to you want to buy something and talk to them about it to learn a little bit more about what's being done out there. And the other thing is being in the construction industry, residential construction, I'm always looking at buildings and houses and all that type of thing, mainly buildings. But when you go to visit someone in a condo, you're looking around, like, what are they doing in the hallways here?
It's one of the curses.
It's like you go, one of our curses. You walk in a building, like I was saying to someone this week, like I love going, sometimes a supplier will say, hey, I'm doing a building. You want to come have a look at what we're doing there? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. You walk in and you see what they show you. And then you spend the next hour. Can we go to the underground garage? Can we go here? And you end up going through the entire building because you didn't go there to see what the paint looked like in the suite. That took you 10 minutes. You went there because you wanted to see what else was going on in that place, right? Like, geez, what are they doing for their common areas? What is like that type of thing? So yeah, get out there and just go see what others are doing. There's no new ideas. Everything has been done once. So build on
go out and learn,
right? Because there truly is no new ideas. There's a lot of, if you think it's a new idea, someone's done it.
And maybe you get to connect the dots in a different way using the same old ideas and just create something that maybe the outcome is slightly different and slightly better and efficient. And I agree, the curse of being in construction and going to houses or especially condos, sometimes I feel like I need to take my green tape with me to some of these condo walking, and I'm like, just stop.
Don't go to, if your friend asks you to go to their PDI, don't do it. Just let them go. It's their place. You're not there to criticize. If they like the way the paint looks,
you're just going to ruin it for them.
Don't ruin it. You're not buying it.
Thank you very much, Dave. This has been a lot of fun. And I'm hoping that in a year or two, hopefully we can have a part 2 of this conversation. And who knows, maybe by then we've had the opportunity of trying out new systems and new technology in the market, and we might be able to update this conversation. This was a lot of fun. I learned quite a bit, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was great. I hope what we talked about today can help some others, right? Because if it's great to see our industry evolve, and if there's a few things that we talked about that help others, that's great.
Just one last thing before you leave. We've created a document called Real Estate Development Toolbox, which you can download for free from our website at realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. This document is basically the result of us asking our network and our listeners, what is a top tool that you use on a daily basis to keep yourself aware of information that's going on in the industry, the changes, the trends, the technologies, the regulations, and or if you, with the tools that you use to make sure that you deliver quality results to your clients and customers, the tools that help you with productivity in what you do, and also any softwares, specialized softwares that you think are useful to share with others. So if you think there are resources that you're using on a daily basis and you would like others to know about them, please make sure to let us know, and we will make sure to include it in the next iteration of this toolbox. Thank you very much, and I hope you find this document useful.